This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Now the backs there are. He backs it. He kicks it. Oh, the fall from Dersma. This is the speed of the culture. 3 bounces down the wing. He keeps going. 4 bounces. Joining the chorus. The Can't Lose Kangas are AFLW premiers.
Hello and welcome back once again. It is episode 100 of North Pod, so congratulations to me, I guess. And we've had our round one game against the Dogs. And yeah, I mean, the boys didn't quite get across the line. It wasn't a bad game. We've watched plenty of worse games over the past 5 or so years. A little bit disappointing not to get the win, but yeah, look, a tough one to evaluate for a lot of reasons. The Dogs were missing a lot of players. The first quarter was shocking, to be honest. The heat led to players fatiguing a bit quicker than normal. And, you know, round one game, there's going to be some more fatigue anyway. So it was kind of, I guess, doubly in force. We go down with somewhat of a fight, but a lot of the same issues to blame. So hopefully throughout this episode, I'll be able to untangle what we can take out of the game one quarter at a time. We'll start that way at least. But I do think whilst it's disappointing, you know, there's some positives to take out, and there's also some really familiar problems to talk about. So yeah, episode 100. Let's jump in and unpack the game. Review. This is where we take a trip down the game, take ourselves through the game and have a look at team selection, all those sorts of things. A bit of an overview, if you will. And yeah, the selected side was very close to what I had predicted. The only difference really was that Jacob Konstanty, JK, he did make the team, and Darcy Tucker was the sub. So I had Konstanty as a possible sub. I thought maybe Dylan Stevens was the most likely. It ended up being that Konstanty got in, and Darcy Tucker was a sub. Bit of a surprising sub for Tucker, given it was his 150th, but I do respect the, I guess, selection integrity, for want of a better word. You know, if Clarko really believes that he's the best player to be that 23rd player, let's not give him a courtesy 150th game. So emotionless, I respect that kind of decision. It's 150, it's not 300 or 400. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, it was a fairly easy side to predict for the most part. It was just those real fringe types that we were a little uncertain about. I think, you know, given the fact that we saw some pretty high levels of consistency in the preseason, this was not unexpected. Since the Dogs were missing a tall in Jamara Ugle-Hagan, and then they had several others out, including Bontempelli, Jones, Waitman, Treloar, you know, we should have been a chance going in. Our teams didn't look dramatically different in terms of the skill sets on display. Obviously, we're still young, but the Dogs were certainly playing some younger players as well. So, you know, on paper, it looked like it was going to be relatively evenly matched, even though obviously we're coming in with a much worse record. And I guess for a big part of the game, that's kind of what played out. Final score was the Western Bulldogs 17-11-113 to North Melbourne 14-13-97. So nearly cracked the 100, which, you know, we barely did it all last year. Unfortunate that it was in a loss, but I think, you know, promising that we're able to hit the scoreboard. And, you know, we only had one less scoring shot than the Dogs. So a 16-point loss, but pretty much even in the scoring shots. If we were able to kick a little more accurately, it's a much closer game. Holistically, though, it all stemmed from a bad first quarter. And I think a lot of us were feeling pretty dejected at quarter time, pretty familiar, pretty similar to what we've felt over the past several years. It was a 5-goal-to-1 first quarter to the Dogs, obviously. We were trailing by 23 points, and we were conceding goals the same way that we have conceded goals for the past several years. It was a very familiar quarter to watch. It's the kind of quarter that we've often played in the third quarters of games throughout the last several years. I guess just starting at the very top, we saw Luke Parker, Tom Powell, and LDU were at the centre bounce with Xerri for the start of the game. So I guess that kind of speaks to what our makeup might look like to start off a game. We didn't have Simpkin in there. We didn't have Sheezel in there. We didn't have Phillips in there. They were either forward or on the bench, respectively. So that's the starting or the best four in the midfield, I guess. And we were pretty good from stoppage, to be honest. I thought really impressed with the way that we were able to extract the footy. That was pretty consistent throughout the game. And, it ebbed and flowed, but we certainly got the better of the clearances across the game. And that was really the only thing that kept us in it in that first quarter. Unfortunately, as soon as we did extract the footy, our exits were not good. We were very inefficient. We were inaccurate. We didn't give our forward half players much of an opportunity. So I guess that's a very early thing that we can work on. It's not something new to us, but we know we do have a strong offensive midfield. It's just sometimes they can rush a little and they can rush the ball forward and not necessarily work through a process. I thought as the game went on, we got a little bit better with our exits from stoppage, but definitely something that we can work on. And then, another thing that has plagued us for quite a while, if it's not a clearance, even sometimes when we're coming forward with the footy, maybe off turnover or just moving the ball through the middle part of the ground, we were shocking with our disposal. Simpkin went forward and missed Larkey pretty early on. Should have hit him up or just gone for goal. Either of those would have been great. Unfortunately, from then it was mistake city. Caleb Daniel bit off an inboard kick that was turned over and went through for a goal for the Dogs, which was, how often has our distributor off halfback made a mistake like that? We've seen it time and time again. It was giving Zach Fisher, to be honest. Aiden Core took a handball receive and then just bombed it inside 50. Missed the hot spot, went over the back and again went up the other end. Definitely for a score. Don't recall if that was a goal, but certainly went up the other end. We just could not defend the mistakes we were making, and I think to all North Melbourne supporters that would sound pretty familiar. The Dogs appeared to just waltz it up from one end of the ground to the other. They were finding it very easy to go from D50 to forward 50 without really even being challenged or having a contested situation. They just found players in space and hit that next player coming up. I think probably what was encouraging in that first quarter is the Dogs got a run on. I think they kicked 2 or 3, and then we were able to stem the flow. Xerri laid a big tackle on Ed Richards, and our clearance work won us territory, but it just had that feel about it that things weren't going the way that we wanted them to go. Caleb Daniel again dropped a mark going back with the flight, and I think that probably summed up how he was feeling. He was feeling under the pump. He was feeling the heat, and that, we know that North Melbourne defenders over the past several years have felt that pressure. You just always feel like you've got no time and no space, and that the ball's always headed down your direction. So it wasn't a great first quarter from Caleb, and, like I said, Simpkin, he's really got to work on his kicking into the forward half, because I really felt there were several occasions where it was just a deflating feeling when we feel like we've got ascendancy, we kick inside 50, and it's just a shocker, to be honest. So, look, that was the first quarter. It wasn't good. I think what was promising, though, in the second quarter, we really came out and we brought the pressure. It was definitely a turnaround in our attempts to corral and to pressure. Konstanty wasn't getting the stats in the second quarter, but he was chasing and pressuring and having an impact. I thought, I'll talk more about him in a minute, but I thought he got a lot better as the game went on. Our hard work wasn't always rewarded, but we pressed. And I think that was a little different to the first quarter, where we were consistently running backwards and trying to guard space. I think to summarise, look, Simpkin summed up our game. He was flashy. He did have some positive impacts, but he just couldn't finish his work. And that was how it felt for us at times. He had a fantastic step running off half-back at one point. We went, wow, he's back. And then, a few minutes later, he's missing what should be a pretty standard kick for an AFL player. So, look, he had an odd game. Unfortunately, then, like I said, we weren't able to finish our work. We conceded a couple of goals late, and that sort of made a great quarter just a good quarter. Fortunately, Cam Xerri was able to kick one on the siren, and Larkey had 3 to half time. So that got us, within kicking distance for sure. I think it might have been 10 points or something close to that at half time. Yeah, 10-point margin at half time. And you think, all right, we're definitely in this game. We've fought our way back. Which was, promising after a first quarter that was super disappointing. And then I think in the second half, we saw just a real seesawing affair. There was definitely periods there where I thought there was a worry that we were going to collapse. It didn't come. We didn't completely implode, which was a positive. We certainly had moments that we're, like I've talked about, where we've had having these same issues. Chom kicked just a horrific long high ball across half-back that put McKercher under pressure. He then fumbled the mark and allowed Vandermeer to snaffle a goal, seemingly out of nothing. It was just the classic, Chom doesn't need to make that kick. It put McKercher under pressure. That being said, he should have taken the mark. He fumbled it. And, it's just these really easy goals that we continue to give up that, makes the scoreboard look worse than it actually is. I thought in the second half, LDU really started to find more of the footy. He had a pretty quiet first half, kicked a couple of goals in the second half, and was actually able to get the ball moving from stoppage, found his way into the game. And Konstanty finally actually got some reward for his pressure. He had a couple of holding the ball wins. I actually thought he was able to apply some fantastic pressure. We got it down to 7 points at three-quarter time. Again, kicked a goal on the siren from Larkey, who took a good contested mark. And then, unfortunately, just an awful start to the final corner kind of ruined our chances. We were able to win back a bit of that ground. Paul Curtis had a solo cameo in the last quarter, kicked 3 goals to really keep us in it, but the fatigue had really set in by that point, and both teams are finding it a lot easier to find space once the ball kind of left that congestion from a stoppage situation. So it was a pretty free-flowing final term. The Dogs kicked 5 goals, we kicked 4, so pretty high scoring. Yeah, unfortunately, just weren't able to get the chocolates. There was a moment about 7 minutes to go in the last quarter. I'm sure you've probably seen it on socials now. Jackson Archer collided with Cleary. Unfortunately, it was just one of those ones where Archer's ran really hard and only had eyes for the ball, but got there late, and Cleary put himself in a really vulnerable position, led with his head, and Archer collected his head with his knee. It was one of those ones where you're worried that Archer's going to break a leg, to be honest. It looks as though he avoided serious leg injury. Cleary was definitely concussed. I know at this point, I'm speaking Sunday morning now, so it's the morning after the night before. He's certainly concussed, and he was taken off on the stretcher. It was one of those really potentially serious knocks. So that was an unfortunate moment late in the game. I guess we'll wait with bated breath to see if Archer does have anything to worry about from the match review officer. It's a tricky one to assess because there was definitely some head-high contact. It was late, and it was a little bit clumsy from Archer, but there was certainly no intent. And because Cleary was down so low, I think there's a fair argument there that Archer hasn't done anything wrong. So that's going to be a fascinating one. If he does get found to have been negligent, the impact is going to be high. So it could be several weeks, I guess. We'll wait and see. We know the way that the AFL's going. It's a real focus on protecting the head, which I think is the right thing. But yeah, this is one of those ones where just zero intent and didn't do a dangerous act necessarily, but the fact that he didn't have more awareness of where other players were is a bit of a concern there. So that was an unfortunate way to end the game, and then obviously, couldn't quite get the chocolates. A 16-point loss in the end, 113-97, but it was, if you take out that first quarter, I think there were a lot of positives in terms of the way that we were able to play. And like I said, the fact that we didn't collapse completely and lose by 40 or 50, I think, is an improvement. Like, this is not a star-studded Bulldogs outfit. They're missing probably 5 or 6 of their best 10 players, but it's certainly, they certainly still have some talent in there. Norton and Darcy were providing a lot of trouble for us in their forward line. Tim English is a good ruckman. Bailey Dale just was kicking goals off half-back for fun. So there's definitely some good players still on that side, but I think this is probably a fair assessment of where we're at, unfortunately. And, it hurts, but it also, I do think there were some signs of improvement there from last year, particularly with the players that are new to the team. So we'll touch on all of those things. But let's get to the next part. Story of the game, and this for me was an easy one. The thing that was the deciding factor, I alluded to it before, but the fact that we weren't able to, get that ascendancy from our clearances and take full advantage of them was, a big concern. We lost the inside 50 count 48-57, despite winning almost every other stat category. It wasn't that we were smashing them in those categories, but we were winning them. So, 6 more clearances, 18 more disposals, 1 more mark, 23 more tackles. It looks statistically like it was an even game, or that we were just slightly on top, except for that inside 50 count. And that spoke to the fact that we just weren't able to go forward with any precision. When we did get stuck in our back half at times and weren't able to do anything other than a long kick down the line and hope for a contested mark or a win when the ball hit the deck. As per, our capacity to kick in our front half was a big concern and really hurt us. There was one passage where we missed 4 disposals in a row in the front half and just kept passing the pressure down to that next player, who then was under pressure and then missed their next disposal. It was a bit of a joke at times. So a real concern. I mentioned Simpkin. He was definitely probably the worst offender, but certainly not the only offender of this kind of, butchering of the ball in the forward half. LDU had some fantastic moments late, but similarly, could have done better earlier on. Tommy Powell's not necessarily a precision kick. I think he's more of a long bomb kick. Bailey Scott's similar. So we've just really got to work on those front half kicks as a side, so that we're able to take more advantage of the ascendancy that we do have in games. Although our kicking and disposal efficiency was pretty much on par with the Dogs, we were both sitting around that 73-74%. The eye test says that their kicks were far more damaging and far more penetrating. They were able to move the ball through the ground a lot more easily. We often went sideways in order to then turn the ball over, whilst the Dogs would just take that space, and we gave it to them. I mentioned it earlier on. We just were intent on guarding space and running back as the ball was travelling up the ground. And I think we adapted far too late and just kept allowing the Dogs to get that next kick and that next possession. And that just allowed them to run and gun and successfully and get free players inside 50. Our defensive strategy was to press backwards, and I definitely think that there's an element of that in that we're trying to be really conservative. It's fair, we leak goals, so I think it's a more conservative approach. But what that allowed the Dogs to do was to keep moving the ball forward and then create these one-on-one contests in their forward line, which, invariably when we've got a pretty undersized defence, inexperienced in terms of playing together as well, there's always going to be issues there. And, Darcy and Norton looked dangerous. They threatened. Neither of them exploded for a massive game, but they certainly took their fair share of marks in the front half. And then it was the Dogs' smalls around them that were getting off the chain. It just didn't work. They just kept finding the next option, and it allowed them to get the ball forward. And we kept kicking long to a contest because we weren't able to hit those kicks. So that was definitely the efficiency moving forward, or into the forward half, was definitely the difference in the game. The fact that they had 9 more inside 50s, but far less of the footy, and not far less, but less of the footy and less possession in general, I think speaks to the fact that we need to work on that. It's nothing new for us. Unfortunately, you sort of don't want to get beaten by issues that you're aware of that you're trying to fix. But I think looking at the profile of our side, we just don't quite yet have enough good kicks to work on this part of the game. And winning it at clearance can only get you so far. If you win it at clearance, then you immediately turn it over. So yeah, that's definitely the story of the game. If we're a little bit more efficient going forward, I think we win the game. I really don't think there's much question about that. We were right in it. And, if we were able to sort of be 2 goals ahead at 3/4 time rather than a goal behind, I think it's a different story, because you can concede those goals at the start of the 4th quarter, but then steady. Whereas we conceded, we were 4 goals down, and then we had to, fight our way back to get within a kick and a half. So that, I think, is definitely where the game was won and lost, unfortunately, and it's disappointing. There'll be lots of North Melbourne fans out there really frustrated with it, but I think realistically, this, like I said earlier, this is just where we're at. This is the journey that we're on this season. I do think we're going to be a little slow to start as our new pieces, find their feet and find the best way to help out this team. But I do think there were some positive signs. Shinboner of the week, I think for me it has to be JP Konstanty. He was one that I probably didn't think was going to get selected or was going to be a really fringe sub-type selection. And, we've seen that he can do this in the preseason, don't get me wrong, but I think it was the most consistent that I've seen him do it and the most impactful that I've seen him do it. A couple of really big tackles and chase rundowns. Kudos to him, because if he brings that every week, he plays every week, I think. Would I like him to hit the scoreboard? Absolutely. But I don't think he has to if he can bring this level of pressure and impact and create, scoring opportunities for his teammates. I thought in the first half he worked really hard without a lot of reward, but it definitely came in the second half. The stats sheet, for him is not massive. 10 disposals, 6 tackles, 2 of those inside 50, a goal assist, which was when he won a holding the ball free kick and then just hit Bailey Scott with a short kick corridor to give him a better chance at goal. That was Konstanty's opportunity to score, and he passed it off. 17 pressure acts, went at 80% disposal effectiveness. So, like I said, the stat sheet doesn't tell the full story, but I thought that his pressure and tackling and corralling was super impactful and definitely had that Shinboner spirit about him. So, for me, also just based on expectation, I didn't necessarily have high expectations. He was kind of the steak knives in the Luke Parker deal. The fact that he's come in and played round 1, first AFL game. I think that's something that's probably easy to forget. He didn't play an AFL game when he was up at Sydney. He's still a young player, and he came in and had a really, really positive impact in our forward half and just brought that energy and that pressure that we haven't seen from our small forwards. You think of someone like Eddie Ford, who I know is not, he's more of a marking medium type, but if he's in the side, that's the sort of role that we sort of need him to play. He just doesn't have that. He's more of a marking high half forward kind of role. So Konstanty was fantastic. Robert Hansen Jr., who I'll talk a little bit about, he spent a lot more time on the wing. So Konstanty was, the stay-at-home half-forward pocket that was putting on the pressure for most of the game. And I thought he had an absolutely, a fantastic game considering it was his debut at AFL level. Let's then jump into the North Podium voting. If you are new or are returning even, it's a little bit different this year. So instead of just going 4-3-2-1, we're actually going to... I'm still doing 4-3-2-1, but any player is able to get votes. So it's not just, you can get multiples. And essentially the system here is 4 votes if you had just a game-winning, amazing performance. So for me, obviously, no one in this game was the 4 votes. 3 votes is a really, really good game, a fantastic game, consistent game. 2 votes is a good game, a great game, maybe even, but a step down from 3. And then 1 vote might be that you sort of played your role with not a lot of flair, or that you had some really good moments, but maybe you drifted in and out, or you had a good game but a couple of errors. So that's generally how it's going to work. It's essentially 4-3-2-1, but like I said, it's multiple players can play. So no one got the 4, but I think I was tossing up if this player got 2 or 3, and I think the fact that he was able to score 5 goals with the sort of entries that he was getting was remarkable, to be honest. So Nick Larkey, I'm giving the 3. A vintage Nick Larkey performance in that it was low possession, high impact. 5 goals won from 8 disposals, 3 marks, 2 of those contested. 9 score involvement. So 3 score involvements even outside of his 6 scores. He was absolutely spent at the end of the game. He was touch and go. There was some rumours that potentially with a corky he wasn't going to make it up for the game. And in the last quarter, he was really battling. I think there was a bit of cramp and potentially some soreness. And, maybe that's just the weather and the fact that it's round 1, but you have to think there's also a bit of a hangover from how he was feeling, so to speak. He was just super efficient, looked dangerous with Darling up there in support. I'll talk about him in a minute. And I think that the 5 goals just tipped me over. 4 is probably a 2-vote game, but the fact that he's kicked 5 in a loss and really just took advantage of every opportunity that he got up forward. Our kicking to him was predictably poor. I mentioned Simpkin tried to kick it to him in the early parts of the game and missed him. There was definitely other times where we just missed what should be pretty straightforward kicks. Cam Xerri intercepted one in the last 30 seconds that Larkey probably should have taken, as he was the one running through the footy, and that could have been goal 6 for him potentially kind of at the end of the game. But yeah, I think a pretty faultless game from Larkey. He did everything that he could to get us across the line. So 3 votes for him. And then I've got several with the 2 votes. Tommy Powell and Harry Sheezel were our best mids, and they've both got 2 votes. Powell had 27 disposals, 7 marks, 8 tackles, 3 clearances, 3 inside 50. He had a really good outside game. He probably could have used it a little better. That would have got him the 3, but I thought he was very consistent across the game and always found himself in the right spots. Like I said, could have been more efficient, but I think a really good game by his standards, and I think he's really showing that he's going to take a step forward in this midfield this year. I don't think he's going to be a star, but I do think in a midfield that has some stars and potential stars, I think he's going to be a really good sort of 3rd or 4th fiddle. Like I said, was really good last night. Harry Sheezel, similar, 31 disposals, kicked 2 points, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 6 clearances. Not his usual one-touch self. There were a few times where he fumbled it, very un-Harry Sheezel-like, but still accumulated, still looked dangerous. I think had he slotted one of those goals instead of the 2 points, it's maybe a different story for his game. It's looked at with a lot more positivity, but yeah, it was one of those unassuming 31 disposal games where he's going about his business, he's playing well, but you're not necessarily sitting there going, gee, Sheez is tearing the opposition apart. So look, Powell and Sheezel, definitely fantastic games to start the year. Jack Darling also getting the 2 votes, just played his role pretty much perfectly. 15 disposals, kicked a goal, 5 marks, 2 of those contested, 3 inside 50s, and just played some really smart footy. Great body work on Rory Lobb, pushed him under or kept him out of contests at times. And that created chances for both Darling and for Larkey. There was a moment where Darling just put the body on Lobb and didn't allow him to get 3rd man up. So Larkey was able to mark inside 50. There was another one where Darling took the mark on the wing and just immediately turned, and then he knew that Larkey would be hitting that spot on the lead and hit him inside 50. There's just that absolute forward craft that, you know, a player with his experience comes. He attacked the high balls. He made good decisions when the ball hit the deck. He hit it in straight lines. Played his role nearly faultlessly, I would say. The only thing that he probably could have improved in this game was his ruck work, or his competing in the ruck was average. Only had the one hit out and probably did get monstered a little bit. But it was interesting because English did so much of the rucking, and then you've got Sam Darcy as the backup. So he's always going to be giving away, 10 centimetres at least to either of those players. Just need to compete a little bit more and use his physicality, but that's a nitpick. I thought his forward craft and his forward work was absolutely fantastic. So 2 votes for Darling, and then Jacob Konstanty, JK, I already spoke about him, but 2 votes for him as well. I think he fulfilled his role and probably even a little bit more. He played a fantastic game. So there's the 2s. And then the 1s, 1 to Tristan Xerri in the ruck, 17 disposals, 4 marks, 2 contested, 7 tackles, 51 hit-outs, 5 clearances, 5 metres gained. And I think that's the thing that sort of knocked him back to a 1 as opposed to a 2. He won the battle in the ruck, but it wasn't really amounting to much. He took some important marks late, but probably needed to be involved around the ground a little bit earlier on. I thought his last quarter was probably his strongest quarter, and the fact that he only had the 5 metres gain says a lot of what he was doing wasn't necessarily driving us forward. That's not the primary role of the ruck, but you'd like to see more than that. I know at a certain point in the game he had something like negative 80 metres gain, so definitely some work to do in terms of his impact, but I thought his effort was great and he had some good moments, so worth a vote. Jai Simpkin's an interesting one. I have given him 1 vote. He had 30 disposals, kicked a goal, 4 marks, 7 tackles, 4 clearances. Unfortunately, just butchered it at times. Had 5 turnovers, went at 60% disposal effectiveness. So, did a lot of good things, but undid a lot of his good work, which is why he's knocked down to a 1 as opposed to a 2 or a 3. I do think promising in that he was able to accumulate that many disposals and find the footy that much. Last year, he struggled with that, even when he went into the midfield in the second half of the year. He probably only really had 2 games where he played super, super well. I'm going to say promising, but geez, I'm going to need to see some improvement with his kicking. He had a fantastic step off halfback. I mentioned that. That was vintage. Simpkin, just his ability to control his center of gravity is something else. So just really need him to consider his disposal when he's kicking in the front half, because if he's going to be doing a lot of that because he's able to win the footy, we've got to find a way for him to hit targets more often. LDU, another midfielder, quiet in the first half, I think really came into his own in the second half, but again, that's why he's knocked down to a 1. 20 disposals, 2 goals, 4 marks, 2 tackles, 5 clearances, 438 metres gained, 6 inside 50s. Just didn't quite have the impact in the first half that I guess you would hope to have from our best midfielder. Did spend some time forward and looked dangerous in that role, hence the 2 goals. But yeah, a real easing into the season. We saw in the preseason games, he also did seem to be sort of going at half pace and not necessarily knocking down the door. So look, hoping for a bit more from him, but the stat sheet, except from his disposal count, looks fantastic. Hopefully he can find a little bit more of the footy and tidy his disposal up as well. He did have a really nice kick late in the game. Like I said, his second half was much more impactful than the first. I thought it was really quiet in the first half, but hopefully second half LDU is what we get to see for the rest of the year. And then the last voting player, Paul Curtis, just a last quarter cameo. 3 goals for him in the last quarter, including a really clever last one where he smothered a handball and then just kicked it out of midair, essentially in the goal square. It was really crafty stuff from Paul Curtis. I thought he'd been super quiet and pretty disappointing up to 3/4 time. But a really, really good last quarter. Took a couple of good marks and kicked straight. And then that third goal that I just spoke about. Had 13 disposals, 4 marks and 4 tackles besides his 3 goals. So look, hopefully he can build off what he did in that last quarter and take that into the rest of the year, because looked really dangerous. And part of that was, I think, because Larkey was off for a lot of that. He was having some pickle juice and stretching on the boundary line. And that did allow Curtis to essentially be our number 1 target, because Darling really is, I think he's going to be more opportunistic. I think it's going to be Xerri or Curtis after Nick Larkey. And the balls did go to Curtis. He marked it and then he kicked goals. So a fantastic effort from him. Just jumping in here to thank you, listeners, for supporting the podcast. And please help me get the word out there. Like I said, episode 100. So hoping to celebrate in a big way by seeing some more listeners. So share me out with any North Melbourne fans you know. Subscribe on your chosen podcast service. You can find me on social media at NorthPod Show or at NorthPod, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube, etc. And if you would like to support the show in an additional way, you can find the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. I appreciate everyone who supports the show. Kanga clipboard time. So let's just unpack a few of those other elements of the game that, maybe didn't necessarily impact the game as directly as what I've spoken about earlier, but other things that are worth discussing. I thought Finn O'Sullivan, I've got how long into this podcast, like 30 odd minutes, and I haven't discussed him yet. I thought he was fantastic on debut. Could have been worth a vote, on a different night. Played mostly off halfback. I think there's a little bit of wing time, but predominantly off halfback. Led the side with 5 spoils. Looked like he just had plenty of time out there to make decisions. He had that real early draft pick vibe about him where he's not rushed. He moves his body around a little bit in order to create space and put opposition players out of position in terms of tackling him. So look, 16 disposals, but when it was his time to go, he went. Really happy to see him off halfback for this year. I think some wing time and some halfback time would be perfect for his development. I don't want to see him playing that Sheezel McKercher role where he is, solely a distributor. I think, he can bring more than that. It's not necessarily the perfect role for him. And I do think we were able to see a little bit of his footwork in congestion was just, that's what I saw from him in his draft highlights, that I think, in a couple of years' time in the midfield, he's going to be fantastic in that role. So he had a really good game. He got involved early with a couple of disposals, and then as the game went on, he kind of drifted in and out. As a halfbacker, you're not necessarily going to be a dominant performer, particularly if you're not that distributor. And I thought he was fantastic. So a really encouraging display from Foss. We've got another good one. You would hope we had with that high draft pick, but fantastic game from him. And having seen Sam Lawler's display for Richmond on Thursday night, you sort of go, geez, we're jealous. Like, he's come in and had a big impact. Finn playing at halfback's not going to have that same 2-goal kind of performance, but I thought was just as impressive, just as assured with the footy. So that's a big win for us. What is not a big win for us is the injuries coming out of this game. Could be a real issue. So round one, we're already discussing some serious injuries potentially, unfortunately. Charlie Comben was holding his ankle or his lower leg and looked really sore coming off in the last quarter. I do think we've seen Chom limp off looking really sore in the past, and then he's got up for the next week, but it did not look good for him. Looked really, really sore, so I'm not too sure at this stage what the go is with that injury. Hopefully it's not too serious, but it certainly looked like he was in a lot of pain. Didn't have a great game, Chom, but certainly is an important part of our side. And then just another tall defender, Griffin Logue, off with a hemi. So between the two of them, that's going to leave a serious hole in our tall defensive stocks for next week. It leaves Core as our only tall defender currently out there. So it's going to need to be, Will Dawson, Callum Dawson, Toby Pink, Matt Whitlock. One or two of these guys are going to have to come in for round two. And it's just, it's not ideal. I think you can take one of them being out and having to replace one, but if we do have to replace both of those, we're gonna either be going very young or very inexperienced or both, which is a concern at this point. I think our defense is under enough pressure as it is without having to add that complexity in. I think the Logue one is more of a concern to me, just from the perspective of he's finding it really hard to stay on the park with his body. He's not an old player. He's not in his 30s. He's not one that is maybe going to be more injury prone because of his age. I just worry, it's another different type of injury. We've seen the ACL, we saw him with his wrist when he came back from that, and now a hamstring. Yeah, it's one to watch because, he's one that we're sort of hoping is going to be here for the medium term. He's in that really, he should be in his prime right now in terms of his age profile. When he came across and he was playing that first half of 2023, I was so excited by what we'd gotten. And we unfortunately we just haven't seen that really for the best part of a year and a half now, which is a shame. Chom is an interesting one because the way that he's playing in defence at the moment, I worry about his development now. We'll see about this injury whether it actually amounts to anything, but he's just not a one-on-one defender, and I think part of me wonders if we're just playing him here as a stopgap whilst we develop the likes of Whitlock and Will Dawson to come in and play defence, and then we allow Chom to swing forward. If that's the case, part of me wonders if we can find a way to play him forward at the moment, because he just looks so out of sorts in defence. He's not a good enough kick to be distributing, and he's not a good enough one-on-one defender. He was playing Sam Darcy one-on-one for big parts of the game, and that's just never going to go well. He's giving away the best part of 10 centimetres and a lot of craft, unfortunately. Sam Darcy made him look silly several times. He's also a bit clumsy, Charlie Comben, which, can be prone to giving away free kicks in the back half. So, look, that's one to watch. It's one game from this year. I'm not going to, absolutely say, let's make the move, this is ridiculous or anything like that, but I just a question mark for me there, and I guess with the two of them probably being out next week, we're going to have to see a different look. So maybe that different look makes the coaching group think twice. Cam Xerri, to me, looked out of sorts. He found plenty of the footy, 20 disposals, 10 marks, kicked 1 goal, 4, had an out in the full towards the end of the game. So looked often to be getting in Larkey's way, to be honest. I just think he's going to need some time to gel with this new look forward line. The fact that he was able to find the footy, I guess, the positive, but yeah, wasn't able to finish his work on the scoreboard, and yeah, just seemed to be in the way at times and not necessarily understanding the leading patterns of the other players. So positive that he found the footy, but hoping for a bit more from Cam Xerri. We wanted Jack Darling's coming across to sort of give Cam Xerri more opportunities, and maybe that will eventuate, but I do think that there might be some teething pains that we need to get through in order for that to happen, because that first intra-club, we saw Cam Xerri kicked, I think, 3 or 4 goals in that game and looked fantastic. Since then, he really hasn't looked particularly lively, or he hasn't been able to put it together. So this was probably a step forward from the last 2 practice games, but yeah, definitely going to need more from him than 1 goal 4. I mentioned Robert Hansen Jr. earlier. I thought he spent a lot of time on the wing and looked great when he got involved. He remains continues to be a really good, reliable kick inside 50, which I think is fantastic. We need those kicks through the middle part of the ground. We don't have players, or we don't have enough players that can do that. So that was fantastic. And I just, pleasantly surprised with the way that he's been able to transition into that role. It's not one that he has played a lot of at AFL level. And so, sure, we know that he can be crumbing forward, and he can definitely go forward at times and potentially hit the scoreboard. But if he can also spend some time on the wing there and be a good disposal and a crafty, quick, evasive type player out there, I think that's fantastic. We know he's going to have deficiencies in his game. He's not strong. He's not going to be a strong tackler, but he can at least corral and run and chase. And when he does get the footy, he looks to be a great kick inside 50. He hit a couple of good kicks in this game, so that's a positive for us. He's definitely, I think, stamped himself as that small forward / winger for a little while. He's going to have some opportunities in the first part of the year to cement that role, I think. I haven't really mentioned Luke Parker. He had a solid 21 disposal game. Really just did what Luke Parker is going to do. Spend some time forward, spend some time in the midfield. Like I said, he started at that first centre clearance. A couple of really classy moments that got us going through the corridor. He hit Finn O'Sullivan with a nice hand pass, in step that allowed Finn to just keep running and deliver the ball inside 50. And it's that kind of one-touch quickness that, I'm really hoping he can bring across the year. I don't expect him to have these game-winning 30 disposal, 2-goal games that, Luke Parker's probably had for Sydney, going back several years. But I think it's that pressure, that tackling pressure, and that capacity for him to just be super clean is what I want to see him bring through our midfield. So that was fantastic to see from him. And yeah, the last thing for this clipboard, I think holistically, we got what we deserved. Our transition defense was bad. It's still really bad. Our defenders still get found out one-on-one. They're not able to win those contests or even halve them most of the time. We did a solid job of stemming the tide during the game and slowing the Dogs down with the momentum and not allowing them to really, kick 5 or 6 in a row. And that's why the margin was only 16 in the end and not, 40 or 50. But our capacity to consistently defend and to not make, really bad mistakes in our back half is still, it continues to hurt us. I almost feel like I could record this part of the podcast and just insert it into each episode, because it's the same stuff that happens every week, unfortunately. So look, I'll take the positive that we were able to stop their momentum. They kicked 2 or 3, and then we'd slow the game down and hold possession up and try and take the sting out, which was good. That's an improvement from what we were able to do last year, but it's also one game. So I'm not necessarily saying that is solved. I certainly don't feel that way. I worry that it's going to be a short-term fix, but I guess, the fullness of time will tell on that one. I think this result ultimately, it shouldn't come as a surprise. I think some probably fans were surprised, but I don't think it should. Our pre-season has not indicated that we're going to be dramatically better than last year quickly. But I do think that there's some hope. And I think that's part of the problem and part of the disappointment that people are probably feeling this morning or this week is that there was some hope. It did turn out to be justified because we were in the game right up until sort of the last 5 to 10 minutes. You could even argue that we kicked a goal late and nearly gave ourselves half a sniff. I think that was very optimistic, but at least we were around the mark, which we certainly weren't for big chunks of games last year. But unfortunately, the road for us to win this game or first game for the year looks set to be challenging because our fixture doesn't really open up for us. Melbourne next week, I'll talk about in a minute, but they're a weird prospect. They're playing this afternoon, so I guess, by the time you're listening to this, we'll probably have an idea of, what kind of form we can expect from them. They're playing the Giants, who are a really good side. So Melbourne's really hard to read, but it's gonna be tough going. I think finding this first win for the year. If only we could play a game like Richmond were able to on Thursday night and just smash all expectations, get the monkey off the back, and then we could play some more relaxed footy. But I can't see that happening, unfortunately. It's the North Melbourne way. Around Arden Street, last segment, or the last segment, talking about this week, and no VFL game to talk about. It's just practice matches, so to be honest, I'm not across. That might have happened yesterday, could be happening today, I'm not too sure, but I do know it's VFL practice matches this weekend, so round one for the VFL next week, we'll be able to potentially talk about how some of our other players that haven't been selected are looking in the reserves, so nothing much to talk about on that front. But there was some news during the week. Cal Toomey reported on Gettable that he is expecting Luke Davies-Uniacke to stay and to sign on at North Melbourne. It's not a guarantee by any stretch, but that's his expectation at the moment. And I think, as a North fan, that's promising to hear. I definitely trust Cal Toomey's reporting. He's right about most things. It doesn't mean that things can't change. Absolutely, there's definitely scope for things to change. And I think if we were to enter the bye winless and looking absolutely depleted, maybe LDU changes his mind. But I do feel like he's such a great match for our culture and the way that we play and the way that we are as a side. I think it'd be a perfect match, and we're certainly going to back up the truck for him. Like, there's going to be a fair bit of money on the table for him if he does want to stay. So, promising that he wants to stay. I think it's fantastic that it's looking that way. But I'm not going to be celebrating until he's signed on the dotted line, because a lot of things can change between now and the end of the year, which is when he's going to have signed by if he does sign. I've always suspected that he's going to leave a little bit, see how things go, see how his form goes. If he continues to play like this, it's going to be interesting, because this game, I wouldn't say he played like a $1.3 million player, but we know that we're going to pay him that much because he's potentially worth that, and we want to keep him. So hopefully his form does improve. Hopefully our form improves. We win a couple of games and he can sign on, in the early part of the year and get the distraction out of the way, I guess. He strikes me as someone that potentially could become a distraction for him, just because he's not necessarily a high bravado, kind of confident kind of player, but who knows? Maybe it's not going to bother him at all, and he's going to be just going about his business. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. But promising to hear that it's looking, better than a 50-50 chance, that's for sure. Yeah, I think we all feel pretty positive if LDU does sign on, given the talent that he has in that midfield. So yeah, I mentioned it before. Looking ahead to next week, it's the Sunday game. We're back where we belong. Sunday the 23rd of March, 3:20 p.m. against Melbourne, back at Marvel. Hopefully it's not stinking hot like this one. Hopefully we get a better, I guess, look at what the players look like in regular footballing conditions. The squad makeup is going to be one to watch for sure, given we've got some injuries in the back half, and who's going to come in for them, I'm not too sure. That's definitely worth keeping an eye on. Yeah, I really don't know who they're going to bring in. I sort of hope it's Will Dawson. I know that he's not necessarily been 100% fit during the preseason, but he's one that I would like to see as early as possible. I'd prefer that over Toby Pink and Callan Dawson, but I suspect, we're probably going to have to replace two big defenders in that back half, to be fair, so perhaps we can see both. But I suspect that Toby Pink's appeared to be the one that was closest to selection in the pre-season, so he may come in for sure, and then maybe it's who comes in as that extra. And then the midfield makeup also, I think, interests me. Will Phil was subbed out for Darcy Tucker. Neither of those two really impacted the game. Will Phil had a couple of good moments for sure, had a really good tackle. Didn't necessarily do too much wrong, but wasn't able to get himself into the game like we've seen him able to do in the preseason. So potentially we went in with one too many midfielders, and we might adjust our makeup for next week. It's probably a little early to tell. I think you wouldn't want to make a rash change at this stage, given that the defence, we're going to have to make some changes there anyway. We'll see. What I would say, though, is our midfield is going to have to defend better than they did against the Dogs, because we know Melbourne has a potentially lethal midfield. Gawn in the ruck, down to Viney, Petrarca, Oliver. Sparrow's a fantastic player through the middle for Melbourne too. There's going to have to be some defensive pressure put on, and we know that hasn't necessarily been a strength. So, definitely one to watch. Luke Parker's going to help, but he's not someone that covers the ground super quickly. So, there's some balancing issues in our midfield there to work out, I think, and we'll maybe get a look at some fixes potentially in this Melbourne game. But, early in the year, there's plenty of water to go under the bridge, I suppose, at this point. So that, I think, is going to do it for this podcast. It's been interesting. If we can play like this most games, we're going to win some, but we're not going to win many, I think. So it's nice not to get belted, but unfortunately, we know this feeling. We know that the optimism coming into the year and the feeling of what if we turn it around. It doesn't look like it's going to be a complete 180 at this stage, but there's definitely some improvement. And hopefully we can build on that improvement next week against Melbourne. I hope you have a fantastic week. Hopefully this hot weather starts to dissipate. We're in the middle of March now. It's time to start cooling down. I think I hate this hot weather. And I will speak to you after the Melbourne game next weekend. Go North! Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at NorthPod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.